Good day to all the viewers and readers of DNA. A warm welcome to another episode of interviews with heads of missions. We're here at the Theatre Royal Suite at Raffles Hotel, Singapore, and we will be meeting the ambassador from Rwanda today. Known as the Singapore of Africa, Rwanda is also blessed with stunning landscapes and rich cultural heritage. Despite its tumultuous past, this land of 1,000 hills has risen from the ashes and become one of the safest countries in Africa, as well as a fascinating nation. We are delighted to have with us today His Excellency Dieu Uwihanganye, High Commissioner of Rwanda to Singapore. Commissioner, good day.
Thank you so much.
High Commissioner, Rwanda is one of the few African countries with a diplomatic presence in Singapore. How would you describe the development of the bilateral relations between both nations?
Well, it's been very, very useful to have a presence in Singapore in terms of having a diplomatic mission. We've been here for the last, it will be 15 years. But for the last 15 years, we've really developed a number of bilateral relations that became strong. That's been very strong. For example, we have bilateral cooperation with Singapore in many areas, in the justice system, judicial cooperations. The two Supreme Courts do cooperate on many matters. ICT, we've signed with them a digital cooperation agreement. We have a cooperation in financial services, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, Central Bank of Rwanda, and Kigali International Financial Center have cooperation, and they are all the agreements and frameworks under those that are very well known and are very important. We have cooperation in education, Nanyang Technological University, together with the government of Rwanda, in the US with the government of Rwanda, ITE with the government of Rwanda, and many more other areas. So we have a number of cooperation, number of agreements that have been achieved at that high level. And of course, like I said, any diplomatic relations is strengthened by the high-level visit. We've had high-level visit on both sides, like I said, with your past questions, but also to that lower visit, to that lower level as well. You have ministers coming, ministers of Singapore going to Rwanda. Recently, you have a commissioner of police who visited Rwanda, the commissioner of Singapore Police Force who visited Rwanda as well. And then if you go to the economic diplomacy, Singapore is one of the top 10 destinations of Rwanda exports. So if you look at all many other countries, and in 2022, it was in the top 5 original foreign direct investment. Because that means people investing from Singapore to Rwanda. You'll have Rwandans coming to Singapore, some Singaporeans going to Rwanda. So the diplomatic presence has really beared some fruits because, that strength in terms of our relationship is simply because you easily can do it when you're based here.
I see. Singapore is known to be one of the strongest economies in the region and historically a vital international business hub. Now, kindly highlight the main accomplishments within both the foreign investment and trade arenas between both countries.
Well, I will mostly do the foreign direct investment from Singapore to Rwanda. I'll just highlight two key ones. There's a digital service provider company in Rwanda that's called Irembo. Irembo is a way that with the government digitize all the services. Let's say if you want a birth certificate or passports, you don't need to go to a cell to go look for it. So that a company that provides the service, it's a joint investment between a Singaporean company that is called Crimson Logic and the Rwandan company. And it's the first in that kind in Africa. It helps in terms of service delivery and in a way the people access the services. It's been very, very successful. It has started a long time ago. And now many countries in Africa are actually coming to Rwanda looking to learn from it. So I would say this is one of the landmark fruits of our cooperation with Singapore, where we start something together in the area of technology. And then it does help other African countries see it as something fruitful, and they would want to take it. Now, right now, there's a lot of discussions with many African nations to take up the same system like what we use at the Nembo. So that's one key highlight. A second key highlight is like the biggest logistic operator in Rwanda is it's an investment of Singapore. It's called Poltech, but in Rwanda they call it Majerwa. They have dry ports, different dry port, inland ports on the ports on the customs and so on. So they do operate that, and they've been there for some time. And then when we go to socio-economic investment, for example, we have the first chicken farming company that was done by Singaporeans, and that kind of sparked interest to other people as well in terms of developing livestock and agriculture, and that was done also by a Singaporean. So these are very significant, I would say, but there are many more investment from Singapore to Rwanda. And in terms of trade, like I said, most of elements in terms of trade, what we export in Singapore are mostly tea, coffee, and mining products, tin, tantalum, tungsten, the fluid teas that comes here. I'm sure they could use as a hub to expand to that other part. But really, the great story is into those investments that were made. But there's also another part in terms of cooperation, which is we also do here the technical cooperation technology. So there are many Singaporeans who have participated in starting some of the key companies or institutions we have in Rwanda. And I'll tell you, for example, in Rwanda, there's an institution called Workforce Development Authority. This is more or less like ITE here. So that trains, that uses train people. They focus on promoting education, technical and vocational education. So the first CEO was a Singaporean. So the idea and the model, but also the first CEO was a Singaporean. And we have a biggest investment company in Rwanda that was at one time, I think 5 years ago, headed by a Singaporean as a group CEO. So there's all these participation between the two countries, which is the same way as well with Rwandans coming in Singapore, participating in what they did in Singapore. Specifically, let's say we have some of the Rwandan problem-led business people, like the coffee I was talking about, the specialty coffee that's served in some of the cafe here in Singapore, done and made by Rwandans. So there's these key highlights, but more or less there are more other investment and trade relationship going on.
We'll take a little detour and talk about something that's close to us Singaporeans. As you might have already discovered, Singaporeans have a passionate love affair with food. Mm-hmm. And could you introduce Rwandan cuisine to us and perhaps also share with us your favorite local dish?
Well, I start with my favorite local dish, obviously. Which is laksa. Oh. All right, so I don't know if laksa is local. I mean, when you say Singaporean food, everyone talks about chicken rice, but to me, laksa is my favorite. And I love, of course, the laksas from the hawker centers. I go to different hawker centers. My favorite one is the one at Angwokyo. But there are many more food that I like as well. I used to like chendo, but because of eating a lot of chendos, then you gain a lot of weight. You can't function properly. So I'm off to chendo now. So my favorite chendo was at Bukitima. People were laughing at me saying Bukitima is for tourists, so on. So, but at least laksa is the best. But in terms of cuisine, Rwandan cuisine, well, it's quite interesting, how the relationship between food, food and how important it is in Singapore versus what you have in Africa. You don't have necessarily the same consideration, but the food is so good in Africa. And because food is important in Singapore, it kept me thinking about our relationship and how we value food back home. But a typical Rwandan cuisine would be made of cassava or banana and beans and then some meat. That would be typical Rwandan cuisine. Some spicy as well, but not the same level of spicy like we'll have in Nigeria or Ghana, but some spicy as well. There are different, if you say, for example, banana or plantains, the way you cook it will have different types of cuisine itself. Or the beef itself, the way you cook it, it will have a different types. But mainly that is, you have, banana, so we say the plantain in that side, and cassava. The cassava, they do a cassava fry, they do a pasta, so which is very popular, and they eat it with meat, meat broth, And then I would say potatoes as well. Potatoes that are boiled, cooked, mixed up with beans and other things. And that's also something Rwandans eat regularly, and it tastes delicious. So that's what I would say in terms of typical Rwandan cuisine.
I can't wait to be invited over to your embassy to try some Rwandan.
We don't cook much in the embassy, but maybe the residents or in Rwanda, you have to go to Rwanda too.
Oh, that is the other option, to fly there. Yes. Now, His Excellency, kindly describe Rwanda as a travel destination. What recommendations would you give to Singaporeans wishing to visit your country?
Well, first, there's one thing we actually need to, when you talk to Singaporeans and talking about Rwanda, one important thing you first need to start talking about is that it is safe. Okay, so because there is, and it's true, I mean, we understand the awareness towards Africa as a continent is limited here in Singapore, and there's of course obviously the narrative in putting every African country in the same box. But yes, the places in Africa, and Rwanda is very safe. In fact, when you introduce yourself, the safest in Africa, not safest in the world. So it's a world ranking. For example, recently Rwanda was ranked the 6th safest nation for solo travelers. So if you're safe for solo travelers, and you're 6th in the world, so the country is very safe. Of course, there are also other ranking where they say one of the safest nation in the world for walking at night. So if you can walk at night and you're safe and you're ranked on that side, so they're safe. It's very important to know it's safe. And in terms of tourist attractions, so I will separate the Singaporeans in two parts. The younger ones likes the outdoor activities, and Rwanda perfectly in a good place for them, because you have, first of all, good weather, very good weather, nowhere near Singapore, very good weather. It's not humid, it's between 19, maximum 23, 24. It's a mix of mostly sunny, a little bit of rain, but sunny most of the time. It's so good. I mean, if you ask me one thing I miss in Rwanda myself, it's going to be the weather. And two, then of course, these outdoor activities you do, we have the famous gorillas. The mountain gorillas, there are few areas in the world where you still have the mountain gorillas, the silverback gorillas, and Rwanda is one of them, but our gorilla trekking is the best. So you can do the trekking in a volcano, it's in a volcano park, so you trek in a volcano park, and it's just different trekking depending on your capacity. You can do it, can do 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and go see the gorilla, be at the proximity of them. So that's the most popular one in Rwanda that you can do when you like the outdoor activities. But there's also other parks, such as, it's called the Nyungwe. It's in the western part of Rwanda, and it's a kind of bird paradise. That's where you do the trekking and you do the bird. It's a rainforest, but with the different types of birds. But you can also do a safari. So Rwanda was the only safari that you can do in a day, but you have the opportunity to see the big five, which is lions, rhino, elephant. So all the big five you can find, you can do it in a day. You will have it as well. And then Rwanda is a country of 1,000 hills. So you can do many other activities. You can trek, you can bike. So if you're passionate for outdoor activities, then Rwanda is for you. And then, of course, there are other type of Singaporeans like you who would want indoor activities, want to do some good shopping. So you'll find in Rwanda, especially in the city of Kigali, wood, fabric, local fabric, African fabric that you can shop. You won't find anywhere else. The bags and so on. Recently there's a trend even for the luxury part of the market to take up some of those fabric and put it in the luxury. I said most of those, you'll find them in Africa. It's kind of a mosaic, but in Kigali specifically, you'll find some of those shopping places, beside other shopping you could do, but also food. So, you want to try something different, food, really local African food in different types. In Rwanda, you find food from Nigeria, food from Senegal, but also the Rwandan food itself that you can try and taste. So that's kind of the two part. So it's a great country to visit. It's safe. It can be managed in 1 or 2 days. It has many all this. And whether you do the outdoor, you love the nature, or you want to try the shopping, or you want to try the food or other social activities you want to do.
Yes. It's like
you feel like you want to go?
Well, I feel like I want to go right now.
Specifically for food.
Yes. Well, I mean, I'm at the age I can do both the outdoor and the indoor. So that just sounds perfect to me.
1 hour trek should be so easy for you.
Oh, what would the name of the trek be?
1 hour trek.
For the gorilla, to view the gorillas. Okay. So Singaporeans, you've all heard that. Now, Singapore embraces cultural diversity. Is that something both countries have in common? And how would you define the cultural identity of your nation within an intercultural and global world right now? How does that unique identity, how is it expressed in our society?
We do embrace cultural diversity as well, because obviously we want to be a hub for Africa. We want to be a place which becomes a gateway for Africa, for other people to access Africa, whether for business, for tourism, for travel, and so on. And if you want to be a hub, that means you become everything, a hub for transport, hub for tourism, and so on. And that requires setting up systems and culture and policies to make sure you have cultural diversity. So we embrace cultural diversity. And people living in Rwanda knows that it's one of the places you can live in and feel okay whichever culture or type you come from. In terms of Rwanda, the Rwandan culture itself and how it fits in the global scene. I mean, Rwandans are very, I'll say, humble people, caring people. That's what I would describe how. But when you go to Rwanda, one thing people tell us is like, people stare at you. People stare at you, and when they stare too much at you, you think why am I being stared at? But actually, when someone is staring at you, is trying to see if you are okay. If you are walking on the streets, if everyone needs to make sure, like, is he okay? And he's actually going to say good morning and say, are you okay? Is everything okay? And go. So the moment you get this is kind of part of the fabric of how Rwandans live and behave, and make sure that every single person around is okay. So it's part of our lives. I mean, I tried to do it here in Singapore. It didn't work out. Tried to say hi to everyone who passed by.
Well, I've been growing up here. I'm not too sure staring at people here in Singapore would have the same.
Yeah, that's it. You stare at people and then you forced to say hello. Are you okay? People look at you, but in my country, that's a common. You feel like a human being. You want to make sure that whoever you see next to you is okay. So, every Rwandan, whether he knows you or not, he will just look at you and say, you meet on the street and say, hello, how are you? Are you okay? Say okay, move on. Yeah? So that it is the key part and what characterizes our culture. But I think it's important globally that we continue to revive that culture of caring to one another. In a way, in the world that is developing that things of isolation, causing hate, division, and so on. So we will want to become that beacon that continue to promote care. The fact that you see someone near you, it's humanity. We have to be human. The idea of making sure that everyone who you meet and so on, you make sure is okay. If there's anything you can do, you do it. It is a key principle that actually you want to put out there globally. So that's what I would say, like one aspect of our culture and how we would want to promote it really in a way.
I think recent news has shown that there's some chaos going on in Africa as we sit here and speak right now. Perhaps you've already mentioned it a few times. How do you assure Singaporeans that a visit to Rwanda is far removed from that chaos?
First, I think we also need to define, of course, what you call chaos. I wouldn't call it chaos itself. I'm sure you're referring to coup d'etat that have been happening in different countries, and you have to understand the context of a coup. What you hear is it's the same way there will be a fight at Orchard Tower. There was a fight at Orchard Tower, and if someone maybe there was a fight at Orchard Tower, would immediately say the whole Singapore, it's under lockdown and I can't go there. That's, to me, how I describe it. Because first, those nations, they have their issues and problems in terms of leadership and how they do. And what happens is, the process in a way, some people wants to take up leadership and make sure they correct someone. But this is something that happens mostly in the capital, within the leadership itself, but people go for their own daily lives. I'm sure, the recent one was Gabon, and I know there's some Singaporeans living in Gabon. If you ask them, they'll tell you they go to work usually and normally. Now, we all know there is a kind of the narrative in terms of international media hype whatever happens. And then people keep talking about just bad news about Africa, and then gives a perspective to anyone that this is only what happens. That's not true. And so even in the countries where you see you've had those coup d'etat, Gabon's, Niger, and so people go to their daily lives. These are countries with 30, 40 million people. They go to their daily life. If you ask them, they won't tell you any issues. It won't mean that 100% everything is okay, but it doesn't mean that the country are locked down. Now, with regard to Rwanda, like I said, it is a very safe country, very stable countries. Even if there will be anything around it here, it has the capacity to defend and keep the security of the country itself intact. So I was sure in Singaporean who wants to go to Rwanda, it is one of the safest nations you will be in the world. So there won't be any problem towards that. And like I said, we have the capacity to maintain order, security, and defense across, irrespective of whatever happens, whether on the continent or across or with the neighbors or anything.
So that brings us to the last question. Based on what you just said, Rwanda is known as Singapore of Africa. Now, that comparison, I mean, you mentioned quite a few things already, but how is this fact that you are the Singapore, a safe nation doing well, how does that influence the other African neighbors you have around you? And exactly how is Rwanda achieving this accolade as being a Singapore of Africa?
First, I have to make it clear, it's not us who call ourselves the Singapore of Africa. It's other people who call us the Singapore of Africa. And if every time when I analyze that, I see many reasons to why where people, mostly in Africa, but also in anyone who ever been to Singapore and goes to Rwanda, do say that there's a lot of similarities. And now I will name some few. We are also a small country. I mean, we are not as small as Singapore. We are 27 times bigger than Singapore, but we are small compared to the standard of other African nations. We are densely populated. I think our density is around 500 kilometers square. Singapore is, I think, 2,000, 4 times this, but it's dense to the standard of Africa as well. But more importantly, we don't have resources. We don't have much resources. We have some, gold, tin, mining. But we don't have oil. We don't have much resources. We rely on the people as the resources, which is almost the same thing what Singapore does. And then I think mostly what people see is it is a clean country. I mean, it's clean. Singapore is clean. When you go to Rwanda, it's very clean. Kigali is the cleanest city in Africa. So I say, we see the cleanness is so good. It's very efficient. Rwanda's government is the most efficient government in Africa. So these are ranking down internationally. I mean, Singapore, I think it's very efficient. I think that's where people see the similarities. And of course, most importantly, the idea that you're small with all these issues, but you're trying your best to punch above your weight and become, big and strategic. We want to be a hub for Africa as well, which is a strategy that I think Singapore did, becoming a hub and a gateway for Asia. And this is what we continue to do. So I think people look at these similarities and in the way we do things and the way the governance is done, and there's a lot of these similarities, but there are differences as well. For example, Rwanda has gone through genocide. This is the most horrible ever killing that happens. And the type of genocide in Rwanda is there needs to be understanding is your father killing a son or killing a wife, thinking is having those people reconcile, living together and growing and becoming the fastest growing economy is a completely different context than what Singapore has gone through. I mean, Singapore has gone through its own problems as well, what it does. So there's some differences, but the idea of people calling us a Singapore of Africa, it is not about, I think it's a good description of what they see. But also on other aspects, there's many things we see Singapore does, we aspire to do as well. And as part of our role here, we look at what they do. Some of good things they do, we apply them in our context of Rwanda, and we would want to continue to do that. And of course, we appreciate where they are. We won't say that we're already Singapore of Africa, but we can be there. We're going to be Rwanda of Africa, but that does some good things well as what Singapore does. But honestly, for someone like me who is here in Singapore, and for a Singaporean or anyone here who doesn't know any country in Africa, when they ask me, how can you describe it? I mean, if someone can put up that Google account and it says it's Singapore of Africa, I think it's kind of more or less a good description of the perspective of what they see in Rwanda itself. With regard to what it does to neighbors, I mean, won't be any issue to. It's like, I think there's also that relations. If you go to Rwanda, it becomes like a hub for everything. You can have access to other parts of neighbors and so on, so long as in Africa. That adds up to all that naming as well. But it's something we have obviously been going to be proud of. We know we still need to do a lot to get to many things that Singapore has achieved. But it's not just to take one to the other, it's applying it to our context. And we know we still have a lot to do. But the description itself might be from the context I've explained before.
Well, I'd like to think my countrymen are humble enough to say that we would like to be known as the Rwanda.
Oh, that's great. I mean, Singapore also, I hear it started, they were calling it Switzerland of Asia. Oh, wow, yes. And I think now things might have changed. Some countries might want to be called the Singapore of Europe or the other. So it's a good thing for anyone who see it. It's a good description of what they see, though the details are other things. But it's something you use it, and it's not bad to have such description, but we're not yet there yet. We still have a lot of things to do, but there are some of the things that are very true in what they describe.
Well, all the best to the things you have to do, and thank you so much for speaking to us. You have been a delight and a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you,
It's
sir.
a great pleasure. Thank you for having me.